Do you hate your opponent playing the game? Do you want combos that make your opponent discard their whole hand? Well, I think I've got a deck for you. This is Discard, and welcome to my ultimate deck guide. Discard is a deck that does what it says on the tin. You're going to use your cards to discard theirs. We run loads of options to rip cards from our opponent's hands, and we have a few ways to really pop off with some combos. While we're proactively not letting our opponent play the game, we also have a lot of ways to benefit from this. Mainly, we have Prince John. This card lets us draw cards whenever our opponent discards a card. It's important to note here that we're drawing as many cards as they discard. So for example, if they discard 2 cards, we draw 2 cards. Another key card here is Bucky. This card is fantastic at synergizing with Floodborn characters, as we can develop our board and push our win condition of discarding cards. Similarly to how Prince John draws you as many cards as you discard, Bucky will be discarding as many cards as you have Buckies on the field. So if I play a Floodborn character and I have 3 Buckies on the field, I'll be discarding 3 cards. Having both of these cards at the same time is devastating for your opponent, since you're going to have so many ways to discard cards from the opponent's hand that just generate insane card advantage, which is what this deck is fantastic at. Although they are both really low on health, they both have the keyword ward, which unless your opponent's playing Steel, means they're kind of basically invincible. There aren't many cards that can clear ward, so you can kind of just leave these cards unexerted on the board, just doing what they do best, and just generating you so much card advantage and discarding so many cards from your opponent's hand. The opponent's going to have a really difficult time dealing with this, since there's not really many answers for it. The only option outside of Steel is Be Prepared, and that card costs 7 ink, and because your opponent isn't going to have many resources because we're just discarding them all, it's very unlikely that your opponent is going to get to 7 ink before we've already established such a strong board that the opponent just can't come back. So how can we actually get to a stage where we lock our opponent down? Like most decks in the current meta, there's no better partner ink than Steel. Not only is Steel great at slowing the game down with cards like Tinkerbell, there's also a multitude of Steel Floodborn characters we can benefit off of. These cards also allow us to generate card advantage if we didn't already have too much of it. Jafar is key to gaining control of the board while drawing us cards, and Beast is a great flexible option which can also draw us cards. Beast can also be used as a huge attacker which can trade into some of the biggest threats in the current metagame. Once we get to a position where our opponent isn't really doing anything, it's our job to end the game as quickly as possible to ensure that they don't find any outs off of the top deck. By far the best card at doing this is Flynn Rider. Not only is this card reliably questing for 3 to 4 at the later stages of the game, it also has evasive so it won't be easily removed, and it also is a Floodborn character, meaning that if we have Bucky, we are discarding even more cards. This deck isn't the most combo heavy, but a solid line of play if you find Prince John early is to go for Flynn on turn 2, and then on turn 3 you can play John and sing Sudden Chill with the Flynn. What this does is discards a card from our opponent's hand, draws us a card, and then we're also going to have the Flynn exerted, meaning that if the opponent's going to attack into it, they have to discard another card and give us another card to draw. While this is happening, if they are inking and developing their board each turn, they're going to be at around 1 or 2 cards left in hand from that early on, which is basically just a win from there. This next combo is kinda high rolly, but when it goes off, it will most likely just secure you the win. Dropping a Lucifer on turn 5 and then singing Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo with a free cost is going to be discarding 3 to 4 cards from your opponent's hand. And again, this early on is just going to clear their whole hand since it's so early in the game. Combine this with the last combo we spoke about and there is almost no way you will ever lose that game. The mulligan for this deck is extremely straightforward. We're basically just looking for Prince John or Bucky, and then cards to synergize with them. Don't be afraid to full mulligan all 7 of your cards to find one of them. The chances that you find one if you mulligan all 7 is extremely high. If we find Prince John, we're going to just want to find our discard cards, so this is going to be the 2-cost Flynn Rider, Sudden Chill, or Hypnotize, basically just any cards that are going to discard cards from our opponent's hand. And then if we find Bucky early, we're just going to want to look for Floodborn characters, so this is mainly just going to be Jafar and then just anything else that you really find. An important card to always put back is the evasive Flynn Rider, since it's our late game tool, so having this in hand since it's uninkable is just going to be a dead card until the late game. For the matchups, this deck's quite linear in the way that it wants to kind of do the same thing in every matchup. But if you know that you're against a certain type of deck, then it's good to keep this in mind for the mulligan. Against aggro, you shouldn't really have a problem because we're playing Steel and they tend to run out of cards quite quickly. Because we're going to be discarding cards on top of that, they're not really going to have too much gas past like turn 4 or 5. In the mulligan, you can look for the 1-cost Flynn Rider because it's just pretty good at trading down on the Lilos and Pinocchios and stuff like that. And you can also keep Tinkerbell if you want. It's quite greedy, but as soon as you play Tinkerbell down, you're basically guaranteed the win just because it guarantees you so much board clear. But keeping that all in mind, you still want to look for Prince John or Bucky just because they are the way that this deck tends to win. And if you can do that game plan, then you should be fine regardless of what deck you're against. Against Control, we're going to have a much easier time. They don't really do much until they get their like big cards online. So for Ruby Amethyst, it's cards like as soon as they be prepared, they're kind of in the control. So basically, as long as we can discard cards from their hand before they be prepared, we should be totally fine. The matchup is pretty favorable to us, honestly. So I'm not going to go too in-depth in the matchups here. I do have a couple of games which I'll go over in just a minute. But it's just important to note that the matchups for this deck aren't really too important to keep in mind. You don't really play them too differently. So this is the deck list that I ended up with. I put a lot of games in, and I started off with the Zero Skater build. That's been kind of popular, but I think without Lucifer, I just really didn't find any success. Now, I think that says more about my skill as a player than the deck itself. That deck is definitely good, but I think if you just want like an easier list, the Lucifer version is definitely better. I'll leave it in the description if you want to give it a go, and it's the list that I'm using in the games coming up. Okay, so this first game, we're against Wintertooth 100. They go by Winter's Lorcana. You might know them, they make content as well. I'll leave their channel in the description. So for the Mulligan, I'm going to get rid of everything other than this Hook to look for Bucky and Prince John. You can get rid of Hook if you want, but I thought I'd just keep it here. I don't think there's a right or wrong option, but I think keeping it is kind of good if you're going first, because you can play on turn 1 and then just kind of leave it there unexerted, ready to make a really favourable trade. So I get rid of a Strength of Raging Fire just because I already have one in hand. And I know from the fact that I got Bucky off of this Mulligan that I can go for Jafar on turn 4, and then kind of go for the Floodborn strategy rather than the like discard strategy with songs. So I go ahead and ink Daisy Duck because we don't have Prince John to follow up with, and on turn 4 we're going to be playing Jafar anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and play Bucky. You kind of always want to play Bucky on turn 2, and then I quest with this Hook. Opponent inks a big Tink here, so I'm kind of assuming that they're going to have a Tinkerbell in hand just based off of that. And then they go for a Prince Eric. Now, Hook can trade quite favourably into Prince Eric because it just trades 1 for 1. And I do top deck a Prince John here, which is quite a tricky choice to make. Now, I do think I make a really big misplay here and get rid of Jafar instead of the Sudden Chill. My thought process was I can play Prince John now, and then the next turn I can play Strength of Raging Fire to clear the board, and then I can comfortably sing the Sudden Chill with Bucky. But in reality, I think the Jafar just does the same thing and develops the board, so slight misplay there. Probably want to ink the Sudden Chill in the future. But regardless of that, my opponent is going to ink a second Prince Eric, and then quest, and then bounce the Eric back for the Fox Mim. So good thing all my stuff is exerted, or otherwise the Mim's going to take quite a favourable trade. We top deck a Hypnotize, which is quite good. Now the options here is I can go for Hypnotize. Now you want to get your card draw first before you make any big options of what you want to ink and stuff like that. So we're definitely playing the Hypnotize, and it's going to draw us 2 cards because of the Prince John. We find a Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo and a second Strength of Raging Fire, so I'm going to get rid of a second Strength of Raging Fire, and then I can still sing if I want to, but I'm going to play quite patient. We're still not turn 5 yet, so we're not too scared of like Grab Your Sword or anything like that, so we've got some time to play with. And then next turn I can go ahead and go for Lucifer and the Bibbidi combo. That's going to discard quite a lot of cards. Opponent's going to ink a Smash, which is quite good for us. They're getting rid of some removal. And then they're going to play a Smash on this Hook. So trading 3 ink for 1 ink is really good for me. And they're 2 Smashes down, so I know that I haven't got to play around too many of them. So I find this Flynn, don't really have any use for it. I still want the Strength of Raging Fire in hand just as a backup. And then we can go for Lucifer. So we get rid of 2 cards from our opponent's hand. Now we do have the option to play the Bibbidi straight away because we can sing it with the Prince John, but I choose not to, just because I don't want this Prince John to be exerted because we don't have too much card advantage just yet. So I go ahead and sing Strength of Raging Fire instead, which is my initial plan to just clear the opponent's side of the board. And then next turn we can Bibbidi the Lucifer back to our hand and discard some more cards. And I'm going to sing again with this Bucky because I don't mind having everything exerted here because I'm expecting a Grab Your Sword from the opponent. So I'm just kind of discarding as much as I can and drawing as much as I can just so I can re-establish my board after we get cleared. An important thing that you should always be doing is checking your opponent's discard pile. Because you're discarding a lot of cards and it doesn't show you exactly what you've discarded, it's important to just keep a mental note of what you discard and just to make sure you know kind of what they have in their hand and what they don't. Because you can tell a lot based on what they discard. So there's the Grab Your Sword, which I was completely expecting and playing around. And thankfully I top decked this Flynn, which is great. So our opponent doesn't have too many cards in hand, so I can comfortably go for this now if I want. or I can keep it in my hand because they've got rid of 2 smashes and they've got rid of a grab your sword, so there's not too many clears for it. So I'm going to go ahead and play it here, and it's going to put the pressure on my opponent, because if they ink and play a card here, my Flynn is now questing for free, and I don't think my opponent's deck has a really reliable way to deal with evasives. And then I can follow up this turn with discarding more cards with Sudden Chill, or a Tinkerbell. So I go for the Sudden Chill here because I just want to put the aggression on now. So we've got to a stage where our opponent doesn't really have anything left, so we can just really aggressively discard cards from our opponent's hand. So there we hit a spellbook, and we can start questing with this evasive Flynn, and the opponent is basically on like a 5 or 6 turn timer from now. We still do have this Tinkerbell in our back pocket as well, so if they start going wide, we can just play Tinkerbell and just control the board that way, and then that stops them from questing, because if they quest, the Tinkerbell is just going to make really favourable trades on their board, and they really need to find an answer for this Flynn, because like I say, they're on a really strict timer currently. So we top deck a hook. We go ahead and play the hook just because, again, we don't want to show this Tinkerbell, we just want to make them go wide, because now we're stopping them from questing with Benja, because this 1-cost hook is just going to trade really favourably into it. And they're not going to want to ink anything, and they're not going to want to play anything, because otherwise the Flynn is just kind of going to start questing for a lot. So they're going to use Strength of Raging Fire and grab your sword to clear the board. That's a huge commitment for our side of the board again. And then they're going to ink their last card. So our opponent has no cards left in hand, and now we can just go for the Tinkerbell. And Tinkerbell from here is just going to dominate my opponent's side of the board. If they play a card or quest, then Tinkerbell is just going to clear it, and we have Prince John in hand just as a way to start drawing and discarding some more cards. So we go Prince John here, and then because this hook is so good at just putting pressure on, I'm just going to go ahead and pass it. My game plan here is to be really patient. I'm going to let the opponent think that they can start drawing cards again, and then I'm just going to use Lucifer and Bibbidi just to discard everything once again, and then because of that, Prince John is going to draw so many cards that we're just going to win the game, like, guaranteed from there. Thankfully, we top deck a Beast, so Beast is going to draw us an extra card at the start of every turn, so we can passively generate card advantage just by passing the turn, basically. And then we find another Beast off of this, so we're going to be drawing 3 cards at the start of our turn, and we can essentially just kind of set up for a huge one-shot here. We only need 14 lore to win the game from this position. So because we're drawing 3 cards as well, we don't mind just like vomiting our whole hand onto the side of the board to just get to the 14 number threshold. So I can go for Tinkerbell here. And one thing I could do is I can play Bibbidi on the Tinkerbell to put more damage and clear the Benja and both of the hooks. It is an option, but I opt not to. It's really good that I top deck Tinkerbell here as well, because it puts damage on the Beast. The Beast is no longer going to be drawing an extra card as well, so it's essentially stopping our opponent from generating as much card advantage as well. We find another Prince John and a Hypnotize and another Flynn Rider, so we can go ahead and play Flynn Rider. The opponent has no cards in hand, so we've hit the 14. As you can see, I'm hovering over it quite a lot. And I choose to quest with everything here, I think. And I think, again, this is a misplay. I think if I just pass here, it's perfectly fine. And I do also play a Bucky for some reason, just to put some more lore on the board. But I think questing with here is fine. There's not really much the opponent can do. They're going to start doing some trades. But either way, I think the Bucky and the Flynn, as long as my opponent isn't like drawing cards, are going to quest for the remaining amount. But there's just a concession, so there's the win from us. Just playing really patiently, making sure we generate so much card advantage, our opponent just kind of drowns in it. And yeah, that's the first win. Okay, so this game I'm against Songs, and for the Mulligan, I find Bucky, Prince John, Lucifer, and Hypnotize, so it's very good. I've got Jafar as well for the Floodborn discard, so I opt to get rid of a Prince John just because it's uninkable, and I get rid of the Daisy Duck mainly just because I know I'm going to be playing Jafar on turn 4 anyway. So we do find a better turn 4 in Donald Duck, but I'm going to go ahead and ink it because it's kind of the worst card here. We can go ahead and pass, and this matchup is quite difficult just because they can use Grab Your Sword from like turn 4. So if they do that, you kind of just lose. And they also have Whole New World, which refills their whole hand to 7, so you kind of start from square 1. So a really difficult matchup. Thankfully, this deck is kind of not seeing as much play now that Control is kind of good. Opponent plays Cinderella on turn 1. I do top deck a Tinkerbell. I'm kind of hesitant to ink it, but I have to, just because I think this hand is just so good. We go ahead and play Bucky and pass, and I'm quite happy with this hand. The opponent has got a good start with the Cinderella. They go ahead and ink a Simba, which tells me that they're probably going to play another Simba. Which they do, just because I think it's the only like strong 2-drop that they play in that deck. And then they do go ahead and quest with the Cinderella, so an okay start for them and an okay start for us. I find another Donald Duck, which I'm gonna I think I do go ahead and ink it just because I don't want the opponent to be drawing too many cards, and our turn 4 is pretty solid with Jafar, and then our turn 5 with Lucifer seems to be pretty good. We set up our Prince John, so we're really good, we're really nice and set up on turn 3. Obviously if the opponent plays an aerial and finds a grab your sword here, we kind of just concede. But that's the risk you play, playing a deck, there's going to be counter decks everywhere. They go ahead and ink a big Cinderella, which tells me that they probably have another one in hand. Not 100% sure on that, but they might. And unfortunately, my opponent does play a tiny Tactician Tinkerbell here, which tells me they are going to shift into the big one next turn. So my Bucky is basically dead. So I'm going to go ahead and ink this Daisy and play my Jafar, get my 1 Bucky value right now. That is going to put my opponent at quite a low hand size though. They probably have a whole new world in hand, or they are likely to find it at some point. But because we're getting rid of a card with this Jafar, they're going to have to ink and play the Tinkerbell, so they're going to have only 2 cards left in hand after they draw for the next turn. They do get rid of a Storm Rage on, which is fine. Both of my important cards have Ward anyway, so they're not going to be able to target it. And then we do have 2 Sudden Chills in hand, which means we can play both of those to completely clear our opponent's hand, or we can play the Lucifer to get rid of it as well. That's really good, because if my opponent is holding on to a whole new world here, which they should be, we can just get rid of it and then set our opponent back, and that's just perfect for us. So there's the Tinkerbell, like we read on turn 4. It's going to get rid of our Bucky, and they're going to sing Grab Your Sword, so kind of devastating from us. But they do only have 1 card left in hand. Now, they're on 4 ink currently, so I'm going to just assume it's a whole new world. So any discard here is great. I can use Hypnotize to discard a card and draw a card, which I think I do go for. Just discard that card. I'm checking the discard pile, and sure enough, there's the whole new world, so we're good. All we need to do now is just establish board control, and we're totally fine. The opponent is only going to have 3 whole new worlds left in their deck. So we do go ahead and trade this Jafar and Simba, just because we need to start slowing them down. And we do, thankfully, find this evasive Flim Rider. So what we can do is we can play this Flim Rider, and the opponent isn't going to have a way to get rid of it, really. They've used 2 Grab Your Swords, and they have no cards in hand, so this is really good for us. And we still have discard in our hand if the opponent does draw some more cards. They do unfortunately find an Aerial, which is just a great hit for them again. They do find a Storm Rage on, which is only going to do 2 damage, so our evasive Flynn is going to survive that. And that's another thing why this deck is quite good in the meta. It's because Smash has been kind of power crept by the Storm Rage on, but the Flynn has 3 health rather than 2, so it's going to survive a lot of the time, and it's just going to have that durability. So I'm going to go ahead and play Sudden Chill, just make sure my opponent has an empty hand. We do know that it is the Storm Rage on, and then we're going to go ahead and shift so we can quest straight away, ink this Flynn, and then we can just start questing. Now you can go for Beast here to kind of get some more card advantage, but I decide that I really need to just hurry up and end the game quickly. I'm not actually sure who wins in this race. They are questing for 4 and we're questing for 3, but I think if I can start playing Beast, I probably should have played Beast there actually, but if I can start playing Beast from now on, then we can start drawing cards, and Beast attacks for a lot once it's damaged, and in this matchup it should be damaged quite a lot. We do find a Tinkerbell, which is better here because we just want to get this out of board control. So we do find that, and then we're going to quest again with this Flynn. So really close game right now. If the opponent decides to quest, we can trade a hit with our Tinkerbell and just clear their Aerial and their Tinkerbell, and then we basically just win the game from there. Opponent do has 2 cards in hand, so we can play this Lucifer and get rid of both of them. Just making sure as well that we're being really patient with our Lucifers and our discard, making sure we're using it at the right time. So Lucifer's going to go ahead here and get rid of only 1 card, so that would be a Song, which is World's Greatest Criminal Mind, which doesn't really do anything in this matchup, so that's a fine discard for them. They don't really mind too much. And now they're opting not to quest, so this is where the evasive Flim Rider just comes in super clutch, and it's just going to start questing for an absolute boatload. We do have a second one in hand as well, but the opponent does find the whole new world here, so they're going to go ahead and ink the small Tinkerbell, and then play the whole new world, which is my worst nightmare at this stage in the game. Thankfully though, they do have to exert a card to do that, so our Tinkerbell is going to start clearing the board that way. We do find another Tinkerbell in our hand, and we do find Lucifer to kind of start discarding more cards from our opponent's hand again. But this means that the Flim Rider that we have is essentially a dead card. It's not questing for anything, it's not really doing anything. And they're going to use Let the Storm Rage on, clear our Lucifer on the board. So we're in a really dire situation here. Thankfully, I do still have 2 Captain Hooks in hand, so they're going to be quite good at trading down and not letting the opponent establish more of a board than they already have. But we're definitely in a really losing position here. We do also have a Tinkerbell, so that's going to be quite good at clearing the opponent's side of the board. We do top deck a Bibbidi here, which is really good. So the Lucifer can discard 4 cards here if I do it quite a while. I'm quite hesitant too though, because the discard is a lot stronger when they don't have a choice what they discard, but because their hand is so big, if I just play Lucifer now, they can just discard 2 like really unimpactful cards and they don't really feel any like negative impact from it. So I'm choosing here if I want to play the Tinkerbell or not. An option I can do is I can play the Tinkerbell and the Bibbidi, and that will clear one of the aerials as well. I don't think I go for it, but thankfully we can use this Flim Rider. It is kind of a dead card, but it can sing Bibbidi for us, which is quite important. So we do go ahead and play a hook here as well, and then what we can do is we can, yeah, so this was the play actually. It was you use the Tinkerbell to get rid of the aerial, and then you can ping the opponent's Tinkerbell, and then you can Bibbidi your Tinkerbell back onto the board to clear the opponent's Tinkerbell. But instead I make a really big misplay here and attack into whatever I just attacked into, so now the opponent can trade Tinkerbells and get rid of my hook, which does give us board control, mind you. But I think the other line of play would have just been a little bit better, especially because we're not really planning on using the Lucifer Bibbidi combo just yet because of the reasons that I just spoke about. Opponent's going to play another Tinkerbell here, so a lot of Tinkerbells in this game, and then they're going to attack into the Tinkerbell, trade them, and then they can actually get rid of the evasive Flynn if they choose to do that, which they do. Obviously it's a dead card right now, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a dead card forever, especially with the Lucifer and the Bibbidi that I have in hand. We do find a Bucky, which is really good. It's going to allow us to start discarding some cards with the Donald Duck that we've got. I do choose to play the Lucifer now, because if I can do Lucifer now, they have, 6 cards in hand, so I can get rid of 4 of them, which is really strong, leave them with 2 cards in hand, and then we can go from there. So the opponent gets rid of 2 cards, and then I can check what they are, and it's just 2 queens, nothing too impactful there. I mean, it's okay card, it's still discarded, which is good for us. It's essentially just out of the game forever now. And I can go ahead and ink this Captain Hook. And it's a really difficult choice here because their Tinkerbell trades really favourably into ours because we have the 1 damage on it. So I just go ahead and pass. Again, just playing really, really patiently, not letting the opponent do anything crazy. They're going to ink a queen here, which I think trying to get to like 7 ink is kind of the number that they want to be at. And they play another Tinkerbell, which is going to clear our Captain Hook and put our Lucifer really low. So again, we're just in a really bad position. We top deck another Bibbidi. So if we quest with the Lucifer here, and we can like play 2 Bibbidis and discard their whole hand, which I think is what I choose to do. Yep, so make sure you quest first as well, just to not miss out, especially on these stages of the game. You don't want to miss out on 2 lore. It's quite a big number at this point when there's only 10 left. So gonna bounce back the Lucifer, discard 1 card and 2 card. So I'm gonna assume that this card in their hand is another Whole New World. We do get rid of another Tinkerbell there, by the way, which is insane. So what I can do is I can ink this Flynn, and then I can just play Bucky and Donald to get rid of this last card in the opponent's hand. And then what this does as well is it gives us 7 lore on board, which isn't enough to get to 20, but it puts us dangerously close, right? So the opponent is either going to have to start questing or like rely on a good top deck. And the card we discarded there was a Rapunzel, if you were wondering, which is good because it is card draw. They don't have any damage units, so it's not card draw like right now, but it is card draw in the future. We do still have this Bibbidi in hand as well. Donald Duck is going to draw them another card, so if they choose to do nothing here and then draw a card of a Donald Duck, we can just play Bibbidi on the Lucifer to protect it as well after we quest and get rid of the 2 cards in our opponent's hand. We're just not really giving the opponent any like interactivity. They find another Rapunzel there, which is card draw. They think they choose to play it just to kind of like accelerate this win condition, especially because we have like so much discard as well. It's kind of just good to play it. We do find a Hypnotize, which is better than the Bibbidi here because it's going to draw us a card. Because it does only discard 1 card, so we're just going to get rid of whatever that was. We do find Beast, which is great. Beast is really difficult for Steel to remove, and it is going to set us up for the win. Unfortunately, I do quest with both of these cards here, and then I pause because I'm like, hang on a sec, they've got 2 Tinkerbells on the field, so that's not too good. So I do quest here, but reality, I should have just passed. So again, just me being really impatient. You want to be super patient, definitely pass there. And don't give the opponent any choice in the matter if you're going to get to 20 or not. But here, they're going to just make some really favourable trades. They can get rid of this Lucifer, and then in turn, they can get rid of, you know, like put 2 damage on something else, and so on and so forth. Thankfully though, they don't have enough damage to clear our side of the board here. Thankfully, I think there are a couple of cards they could have had, but they don't have them. They do only have one card in hand as well, so the odds of that are quite unlikely, but you just want to make sure that you guarantee your win when you're near this stage of the game. There's the concession, and there's the win against Songs. Very difficult matchup, but if I can do it, I believe that you can do it. And that's it for this deck guide. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I don't really know what deck to do next, so if you guys leave a comment, whatever the most liked comment is on the deck, I'll do that for the guide. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.